The native girl closed her eyes to die, but woke up on the lonely rancher's bed. The night was quiet in a way that felt heavy, not peaceful. The sky stretched wide above the empty land, full of stars that did not seem to notice the pain below them. The young native woman walked slowly along the dirt road, her steps uneven, her breath shallow. She had been walking for a long time, though she no longer knew exactly how long. Time had blurred into a single stretch of exhaustion. Her clothes were thin for the cold, worn from years of use. Dust clung to the hem of her pants and the sleeves of her jacket. Her hair, long and dark, hung loose around her face, tangled by wind and neglect. Every part of her body ached, but the pain inside her chest was heavier than anything else. It was the kind of pain that could not be seen, the kind that made each step feel pointless. She had learned early in life how to be strong. Strength was not something she chose. It was something life demanded from her. She grew up watching her family struggle, watching promises break, watching people leave or disappear without explanation. She learned not to expect help, because help often came with conditions or did not come at all. In school, she was quiet. Teachers often mistook her silence for lack of interest, but the truth was different. She listened carefully, always aware of how easily attention could turn into judgment. Other children did not understand her background, her culture, or the weight she carried. Some were cruel without realizing it. Others simply looked past her, as if she were part of the wall. As she grew older, life did not become easier. Work was hard to find and harder to keep. She took whatever jobs she could, cleaning, serving, helping where help was needed. Each job promised stability but delivered only temporary relief. When the work ended, so did the small sense of safety she had built around herself. Loss followed her quietly. A family member who passed too soon, a home she could not return to, a sense of belonging that slipped further away each year. She carried these losses inside her, stacking them one on top of another, telling herself she would deal with them later. But later never came. That night, the weight became too much. Her body was tired, but her mind was even more worn. Thoughts circled endlessly, asking questions with no answers. What was the point of continuing if every day felt the same? How long could a person survive without being truly seen? She reached the edge of a large open property, marked by a simple wooden fence that stretched far into the distance. Beyond it, the land rolled gently under the moonlight. There were no nearby houses, no streetlights, no sound of traffic, just wind, dry grass, and silence. She stopped walking. Her legs trembled as if they no longer belonged to her. She leaned against the fence for support, her hands gripping the rough wood. The cold seeped deeper into her skin, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts slowed, as if even her mind was tired of moving. She slid down until she was sitting on the ground, her back against the fence. The earth beneath her was hard, unforgiving, yet steady. For a moment she simply sat there, breathing shallowly, staring at nothing. Tears came without warning, not loud or dramatic, but quiet and steady. They traced warm lines down her face, disappearing into the dirt. She thought about how tired she was of fighting, tired of proving she deserved space in the world. Tired of waking up each day with the same ache in her chest. She did not think of herself as weak. She knew how much she had endured, but endurance, she realized, had its limits. The cold made her shiver. Her eyelids felt heavy, each blink slower than the last. She pulled her jacket closer around herself, though it did little to help. The ground seemed to pull at her, inviting her to rest. Just for a moment, she told herself, just to close her eyes. She tilted her head back against the fence and looked up at the sky. The stars were sharp and distant, beautiful in a way that felt almost cruel. She wondered if anyone would notice if she disappeared, if her absence would leave a mark, or if the world would continue exactly as it always had. Her breathing slowed. The thoughts that had been racing for hours began to fade. It was not peace she felt, but surrender. A letting go of the constant effort it took just to exist. Her eyes closed, not with drama or final words, but with exhaustion. Somewhere far away, a coyote called into the night. The sound echoed briefly, then faded. The land returned to stillness. She remained there, small and unmoving against the vastness of the ranch land, unnoticed and alone. Not far from where she lay, a rancher slept in a small house that had stood on the land for decades. He was a man shaped by routine, by early mornings and long days. He lived simply, his life measured by sunrises, livestock, and the steady rhythm of work. Loneliness had become such a constant companion that he rarely thought to name it. That night he slept restlessly, unaware of the fragile life just beyond his fence line. The land held its secrets quietly as it always had. As the hours passed, the cold deepened. The young woman's body, already weak, struggled to keep warmth. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. She did not dream. She did not think. She simply existed in a fragile space between awareness and darkness. The night did not end quickly. It stretched on, long and unforgiving. But somewhere beyond the horizon, morning was waiting. And with it, a change neither of them could yet imagine. Unseen, unnoticed, and nearly forgotten by the world, her story did not end there. It paused, balanced on the edge of something unknown, ready to turn in a direction she never expected. Cold air still held the night's bite, but the promise of warmth was there. Birds began to move in the trees, their small sounds breaking the long silence. The rancher woke before the sun, as he always did. His body followed a rhythm shaped by years of work, not by clocks. He sat up on the edge of his bed, rubbed his face, and listened. The house was quiet, just the way it had been for a long time. No voices, no footsteps, only the faint sound of wind brushing against the walls. He dressed simply, pulling on worn jeans, a clean shirt, and boots that had carried him across the land more times than he could count. He brewed coffee and drank it standing by the window, looking out at the fields. The land looked the same as it always did, open and honest. It never pretended to be anything else. After feeding his dog and grabbing his jacket, he stepped outside. The air was sharp, filling his lungs and clearing his thoughts. He walked toward the barn, planning his morning tasks. There was fencing to check, animals to look over, and repairs that never seemed to end. As he moved along the fence line, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a fallen bundle of clothing or debris caught near the posts. That was not unusual. The wind sometimes carried things from far away. But as he drew closer, he noticed the shape was wrong. He stopped walking. There near the fence was a person. His heart tightened. He moved faster, his steps quick and careful. The closer he got, the clearer it became. A young woman lay on the ground, her body still, her face pale against the dark earth. Her hair spread around her head, tangled and dusty. He knelt beside her without thinking. Years of working alone had taught him to stay calm in difficult moments. He checked her breathing first. It was there, faint but real. Relief washed over him, quick and strong. She was cold. That was the first thing he noticed when he touched her arm, far too cold for a person lying in the open. He took off his jacket and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders. His movements were slow, respectful. He did not know who she was or what had happened, but he knew she needed help. He looked around, scanning the land as if someone might appear, but there was no one. Just empty space and quiet fields. Whoever she was, she had come here alone. He considered his options. The nearest town was far, and she was in no condition to be moved roughly. He decided quickly. He lifted her as gently as he could, surprised by how light she felt. She stirred slightly but did not wake. Carrying her toward the house, he felt a strange mix of concern and responsibility. He had lived alone for so long that another human presence felt unreal. Still, he did not hesitate. Some things did not require thought. Inside the house, he laid her on his bed. It was the warmest place he had. He placed blankets over her and adjusted the heater. Then he stepped back, giving her space, unsure what to do next. He brought water and set it on the table nearby. He did not try to wake her. Instead, he watched from a distance, listening to her breathing. Each rise and fall of her chest felt like a small victory. As the hours passed, he moved quietly around the house, checking on her often. He made soup, simple and warm, letting it sit until she might be able to eat. He cleaned the mud from her shoes and placed them near the door. He noticed her hands were rough, marked by work and hardship. These were not the hands of someone who had lived an easy life. She began to stir as the sun climbed higher. Her brow tightened and she shifted under the blankets. The rancher froze, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. He did not want to frighten her. Her eyes opened slowly. Confusion crossed her face, followed by fear. She tried to sit up, but her body resisted. "Easy," he said softly, keeping his voice low. "You're safe." She stared at him, her eyes wide. The room was unfamiliar. The bed, the walls, the smell of coffee and clean wood. She pulled the blankets closer, her breathing quick. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "My house," he answered. "I found you outside near the fence. You were cold." She looked around again, taking in the simple room. There was no sign of danger, no rush in his movements. Still, her instincts were sharp, shaped by years of disappointment. He took a step back, giving her space. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I just wanted you to warm up." She swallowed and nodded slightly. Her head ached and her limbs felt heavy. Memories of the night before came back slowly, not all at once. The road, the fence. The cold. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "How long have I been here?" she asked. "Since early morning," he replied. "You slept most of the day." She let out a small breath. Something inside her loosened just a little. She noticed the way he stood near the door, not blocking it. The way his eyes held concern, not control. "I can bring you some soup," he offered. "Only if you want." She hesitated, then nodded. Hunger made the decision for her. He returned with a bowl and helped her sit up slowly. She ate in small bites, each one bringing warmth back into her body. They did not talk much. Words felt heavy, unnecessary. Silence filled the room, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt different from the silence she knew. This one did not judge. When she finished, he took the bowl and stood. "You can rest," he said. "Take your time." As he left the room, she leaned back against the pillows. The bed was soft, the blankets warm. She did not understand how she had come to be here, but she knew one thing. Someone had chosen to help her when they did not have to. Outside, the rancher stood on the porch, looking out over the land. He felt unsettled, not by fear, but by the sudden change in his quiet life. Still, beneath that feeling was something else. A sense that this morning had brought more than just another day of work. Neither of them knew what would come next. But for now, the house held two lives that had crossed paths by chance, held together by kindness and a moment of human choice. She woke slowly, the morning light filtering softly through the small windows. Her head ached and her body felt stiff. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The last memory she had was of the cold dirt beneath her, the night air biting at her skin, and the thought that she might not wake again. And now she was here, on a bed, warm and safe, in a place that felt completely unknown. She tried to sit up, but her arms and legs protested. The effort was exhausting, and she let herself fall back onto the soft pillow. She looked around the room, taking in the simple furniture, the clean sheets, the small table by the window with a cup of water on it. Everything was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. The silence was not threatening, but it was different from the silence she was used to. It felt alive, gentle, almost protective. A voice broke the quiet. "You're awake," said the rancher, standing a few steps away. He kept his distance, leaning lightly against the doorframe as if he was unsure of how close he should be. His voice was calm, soft, carrying no anger, no expectation, just observation. She blinked slowly, taking in his figure. He was not imposing, but his presence filled the room. There was a quiet strength in the way he held himself, the way he spoke without raising his voice. She studied him, trying to gauge whether she should trust him or be ready to run. Her body told her to stay cautious, but her mind was too exhausted to argue. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My house," he replied. "You were outside near the fence. I brought you in. You were very cold and not in good shape." She wanted to remember more, to understand what had happened, but the memories were scattered. The cold, the road, the emptiness she had felt the night before, all of it rushed back in fragments. She shivered slightly, not just from the memory of cold, but from the vulnerability she felt now, lying on a bed she did not own in a house of a stranger. He noticed her shiver and moved just a little closer, holding out a blanket. "Here, wrap this around you. It'll help with the chill." She hesitated, her pride warring with her need. Pride had kept her moving all these years, had kept her surviving, but the shivering in her body made the decision for her. She accepted the blanket, pulling it tightly around herself. The warmth spread slowly, soothing muscles and calming her mind just a little. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. "You can rest here as long as you need." She studied his face, looking for signs of judgment, of doubt, of impatience. She found none. There was only concern, quiet and steady. That simple truth made her chest feel lighter, though the ache inside was far from gone. Minutes passed in silence. She focused on her breathing, noticing the warmth of the blanket, the soft hum of the heater, the way the sunlight fell across the floor. It was a strange comfort, this peacefulness she had not felt in a long time. Her body began to relax, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel a little safe. Finally, she spoke again. "Why did you help me?" The rancher paused. He considered his words carefully. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one deserves to be left out there, alone, like that." She looked down at her hands, noticing how rough and worn they were. She had spent years carrying pain and laboring to survive, and now someone offered her kindness without expecting anything in return. It was almost unbearable in a strange way. She did not know how to accept it. "You don't have to answer right away," he added. "Take your time." And she did. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself rest against the pillow. Her mind, though still heavy, began to quiet. She thought about the night, the cold, the loneliness she had carried like a weight on her shoulders. She had expected darkness to take her. She had almost given up. And yet here she was, alive, warm, with someone watching over her. Hours passed. She drifted in and out of sleep, waking occasionally to the sound of him moving quietly through the house. He did chores, checked the animals, prepared small meals, and returned to check on her. His actions spoke louder than any words. She did not have to ask for help. It was simply given. She began to notice the details, the way he moved with care, the way he left her space when she needed it, the way he carried himself with quiet dignity. When hunger finally pressed on her, she accepted the bowl of soup he brought. The aroma was simple, earthy, and unfamiliar, but it reminded her of home in some distant memory. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, letting warmth fill her body. She noticed the way he watched without intruding, giving her the freedom to be herself, even as fragile as that self was. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. "Yes," he replied. "It's been that way for a long time. Quiet, simple. Hard work keeps me busy and company is rare." She thought about her own life, how isolation had been a constant companion. Yet the kind of loneliness she felt was different. His was a choice, shaped by the land and by years of routine. Hers had been imposed, shaped by circumstances beyond her control. It was strange, realizing that someone could be alone and still find peace, while she had been alone and only felt emptiness. They did not speak much after that. Words were heavy for her, and she did not want to burden him with her pain. Instead, she observed quietly, learning about him without asking too many questions. She noticed small details, the way he handled the coffee cup, the way he walked across the wooden floor, the calm steadiness in his eyes. There was a quiet strength there, one that did not demand respect but earned it naturally. Later, when she felt stronger, she ventured out onto the porch. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the land in soft golden light. Fields stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted with grazing animals and wooden fences. She inhaled the crisp air, noticing the scents of earth, grass, and animals. It was different from the world she had known. The land seemed vast and endless, yet welcoming, not threatening. The rancher joined her outside, standing quietly nearby. He did not ask questions, did not demand answers. He simply allowed her to take in the world, giving her the space to regain her strength. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she did not feel the need to hide or protect herself. She sat on the wooden railing, legs dangling over the edge, and let the warmth of the sun seep into her bones. She thought about what had led her here, about the darkness she had carried, and about the moment she had almost given up. She felt a quiet gratitude, not just for being alive, but for the fact that someone had seen her, had acted without hesitation, had given her a chance. The rancher spoke softly, almost to himself. "You don't have to decide anything right now, just rest. The world can wait a little." She looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his words. No one had ever offered such patience. No one had ever told her it was okay to simply be, without proving herself or fighting to survive another day. It was a strange relief, heavy with emotion she had almost forgotten she could feel. As the day went on, she began to move more confidently, exploring the small house, noticing the animals outside and feeling the warmth of the land around her. Each step was small but significant, a reminder that she could exist in the world without fear, at least for now. By evening, she had settled into a quiet rhythm. She and the rancher shared small moments, a laugh at a clumsy animal, a conversation about the weather, a cup of tea taken in silence. It was simple, ordinary, yet it held more meaning than she could express. That night, as she lay in the bed that had become her temporary refuge, she realized something important. She had woken up, not just physically, but in a deeper sense. For the first time in a long while, she felt the possibility of life continuing beyond pain, beyond loneliness, beyond the fear that had consumed her. And while she did not yet know what the future held, she understood one undeniable truth: she was alive. And that life, fragile and unexpected as it was, had given her a chance she could not have imagined. Days passed slowly, almost like the land itself had its own rhythm, separate from the world she had left behind. The young woman stayed in the small house, gradually regaining strength. Each morning she woke to the soft light spilling through the windows. Each evening she rested to the sounds of the wind and the animals outside. Life moved quietly, without the chaos or demands she had grown used to. It was strange, almost foreign, and yet comforting in ways she could not fully explain. The rancher continued his routine, moving through his days with quiet determination. He fed the animals, repaired fences, checked water supplies, and carried on with the work that had long defined his life. But now, his tasks were punctuated by glances toward the house, small pauses to ensure she was okay. He did not intrude on her space. He did not rush her. Instead, he offered subtle signs of care: a warm blanket placed on the bed, a bowl of food set gently beside her, a soft reminder to drink water. At first, conversation was sparse. Words felt heavy for her, and she was unsure if she could speak without revealing too much. Fear lingered like a shadow she could not shake. Yet over time she began to talk. It started with small things: the taste of the soup he made, the way the sun lit the porch in the morning, the sight of a horse grazing calmly in the field. Simple observations, safe words. The rancher listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He spoke when necessary, offering answers to questions she asked or gentle explanations of life on the ranch. His voice was steady, calm, carrying no impatience or expectation. Slowly, she began to realize that she could speak without fear, that words could exist without punishment, and that trust was not an impossible dream. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, she finally opened up more. Her voice was hesitant at first, but the weight she had carried for so long seemed to demand release. She told him about her childhood, about growing up in a small community where life was hard and opportunities were few. She spoke of family members who had struggled, some who had left, others who had passed away. Her words were careful, measured, but they carried a depth of pain and resilience that she had never shared with anyone before. The rancher listened quietly, his face unreadable, yet his eyes reflected understanding. He did not offer advice or judgment. He did not try to fix what had been broken. He simply heard her, and for her, that act alone felt revolutionary. She had spent years learning to survive alone, and now, someone was simply listening. Someone cared enough to give her attention without expectation. She also spoke about the moments that had brought her to the edge, the nights when the world felt too heavy to bear. She did not go into every detail, but she shared enough to let the rancher understand the depth of her struggle. And in that sharing, a strange relief began to grow. Speaking aloud gave shape to her pain, made it something tangible rather than a constant, shapeless weight pressing on her chest. The rancher shared some of his own story too, in small doses. He did not reveal everything at once. Instead, he offered glimpses of a life shaped by solitude, by loss, and by hard work. He spoke of people he had loved and lost, of dreams deferred, of the quiet ache of long days spent in silence. She listened, surprised to realize that loneliness could take many forms. Hers had been forced, a product of hardship. His had been chosen, shaped by the rhythms of life and the land. Yet both forms of solitude carried their own scars. Through these conversations, an unspoken understanding began to grow between them. They did not need to speak constantly to feel connection. They shared space, silence, and small acts of kindness that slowly built trust. She noticed how he moved through the world with care, how he treated animals, how he respected her need for distance and space. She realized that safety did not always come with words or promises. Sometimes it came quietly, in steady actions that demanded nothing in return. She began to help around the house in small ways. Simple tasks, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, feeding the animals under his guidance, gave her a sense of purpose. Each task reminded her that she could contribute, that she could be more than a survivor. She learned to handle the animals carefully, to approach them with patience and respect. The rancher guided her, but he allowed her to learn at her own pace. Mistakes were met with gentle correction, never frustration. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection. They often sat outside together, watching the sun set over the fields. The colors stretched wide across the sky, orange and pink blending into the soft blue of twilight. She would sometimes speak of memories, distant and tender, or ask questions about the land and the animals. He would answer simply, clearly, without embellishment. These moments were ordinary, yet they carried an extraordinary sense of peace. One night, as they sat on the porch, a breeze stirred the grass and the sky was filled with stars. She turned to him quietly. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she admitted. "I thought I had lost that forever." He nodded, looking at her steadily. "Safety is hard to find," he said softly, "but it exists if you're willing to let it in." The words struck her. It was not a promise, not a guarantee, but a possibility. And for someone who had lived with fear and uncertainty, even a possibility felt like a gift. She realized that she was beginning to trust, to let the idea of life beyond pain and loneliness enter her thoughts. Days turned into weeks and small routines became their shared rhythm. She grew stronger physically, and her mind began to feel lighter. She no longer flinched at the sound of footsteps or sudden movement. She learned to walk in the fields, to notice the details of the land, the patterns of the wind in the grass, the way sunlight fell on a horse's back, the quiet hum of the insects in the evening. Life became tangible again, filled with small, concrete moments rather than endless shadows. The rancher and the young woman shared quiet laughter over simple things: a clumsy animal, a spilled cup, the unexpected taste of a meal. Each laugh built connection, reminding her that joy could exist alongside pain. She began to feel a sense of belonging, however tentative. It was not a rush of love or friendship, but a gentle recognition that she had a place, even if temporary, where she could simply be. One morning she asked him about his own family. He spoke carefully, telling her of parents long gone, siblings who lived far away, and the life he had chosen on the ranch. She listened, learning about the choices and sacrifices that had shaped him. In return, he listened to her dreams, small, quiet hopes she had never spoken aloud before. She had once believed that dreams were pointless, that survival left no room for hope. But now, sharing them made her feel lighter, more human. They began to talk about the future, not in terms of plans or demands, but possibilities. She realized that she could choose her path, and for the first time in years, she felt a spark of agency. It was terrifying and exciting all at once. The rancher did not pressure her. He simply offered the knowledge that she could decide for herself. That alone was revolutionary. Through all of this, a bond grew between them, formed not from romance or drama, but from shared humanity. It was built on trust, patience, and the willingness to be seen without judgment. She learned that connection did not have to be perfect or complete. It only had to exist in small, meaningful moments. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned deep blue, she looked out across the fields. She saw the land stretching endlessly, vast and open, and felt a quiet strength within herself. She had faced darkness, isolation, and despair, and yet she was here, alive, stronger, and beginning to trust again. The rancher's presence had given her more than safety. It had given her the chance to rediscover herself. She realized that life was not about erasing the past or pretending it had never happened. It was about moving forward, finding moments of connection, and allowing oneself to be vulnerable without fear. For the first time, she understood that trust could grow slowly, that healing could take time, and that she did not have to carry her burdens alone. That night, as she lay in the bed that had become a refuge, she felt a quiet gratitude. She was learning that safety and care could exist, even in the simplest gestures. She had begun to speak, to laugh, to hope. She had found someone who saw her, not as a burden or a problem, but as a human being worthy of respect and compassion. And in that quiet, she realized something powerful. Her story was not over. The night she had closed her eyes to give up was not the end. Life had given her a second chance, a new beginning, and the possibility to heal, not instantly, not perfectly, but slowly and with care. She closed her eyes, not in surrender, but in quiet reflection. Tomorrow would bring another day, another step forward. And for the first time in a long while, she was ready to face it, not alone, but with someone who had shown her the meaning of trust and human kindness. The morning air felt different. It was not colder or warmer than usual, but it carried a quiet sense of change. The young woman stood on the porch, holding a cup of tea with both hands. Steam rose gently, disappearing into the open sky. She watched the land stretch endlessly before her, the fences cutting soft lines across the fields. The animals moved calmly, unaware that something inside her was shifting. She had slept well the night before, deeper than she had in years. There were no sudden jolts awake, no racing thoughts pulling her back into fear. When she opened her eyes that morning, she felt rested, but also thoughtful. Her body was stronger now, and her mind clearer. With that clarity came a question she could no longer avoid. What would she do next? The ranch had become a place of safety, a pause in her long struggle, but pauses were not meant to last forever. She knew this, even if the thought made her chest tighten. She could not stay here forever without deciding something. And for the first time in a long while, the choice was hers. The rancher joined her quietly, standing beside her without interrupting her thoughts. He did not ask questions. He had learned that silence was sometimes the greatest form of respect. They stood together, watching the morning unfold. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice steady but soft. He nodded, waiting. "I don't want to run anymore," she continued, "but I don't know exactly where I belong." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said. "Belonging isn't always about a place. Sometimes it's about finding your footing first." His words settled into her gently. She realized how different this was from the pressure she had known before. No one was pushing her. No one was telling her what she should be. She felt respected as an equal, not treated as someone fragile or broken. Later that day, she walked alone along the fence line where she had once collapsed. The memory no longer felt sharp, but it was still there, a reminder of how close she had come to disappearing. She stood in that same spot and breathed deeply. The land felt steady beneath her feet. She was standing now, not lying in the dirt. That alone felt like a victory. She thought about her past, about the people she had lost, the places she had left behind. Pain was still part of her story, but it no longer defined her entirely. She realized she did not need to erase her past to move forward. She only needed to carry it with honesty. When she returned to the house, the rancher was repairing a chair on the porch. She watched him work, the calm focus in his movements. She saw someone who had also chosen a quiet life, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. That evening she spoke again, more clearly this time. "I think I want to learn," she said. "I want to work, I want to stand on my own again." He smiled slightly, not surprised. "You already are," he said. "But if you want to stay for a while longer, help around the ranch, get stronger, that's possible." Her heart lifted, not because he offered her a place, but because he offered her dignity. "I don't want charity," she said quickly. "This wouldn't be that," he replied. "Everyone here earns their keep, including me." She nodded, relief washing over her. That night she slept with a quiet sense of purpose. Not a grand plan, not a promise of forever, but something just as powerful, a direction. Days turned into meaningful work. She woke early, learned routines, cared for animals, and took pride in each task she completed. Her hands grew stronger, her steps more confident. Mistakes still happened, but they no longer felt like proof of failure. They were simply part of learning. She laughed more now, not loudly but honestly. She noticed joy in small things, a successful repair, a warm meal, a calm sunset. These moments stitched something back together inside her. One afternoon, a truck passed on the distant road, stirring dust into the air. She watched it go, realizing that once, the sight would have filled her with panic. Now it simply reminded her that the world was still out there, waiting when she was ready. She sat with the rancher that evening, watching the stars emerge one by one. "I think I'll leave someday," she said quietly. He nodded. "I figured you would." "But not yet," she added. "That's okay too." There was no sadness in his response, only understanding. She realized then how rare this connection was. Not something that trapped or demanded, but something that supported growth, even if that growth meant separation someday. As weeks passed, she began making plans. Small ones at first. Learning new skills, saving a little money. Writing letters she had once been too afraid to send. Each step was an act of courage. The day came when she packed a small bag, not to leave immediately, but to remind herself that she could. The rancher helped her fix a strap, his movements steady as always. "You'll do fine," he said. She smiled, feeling emotion rise in her chest. "You helped save my life." He shook his head gently. "You saved yourself, I just opened the door." That truth stayed with her. On her last morning at the ranch, the sun rose bright and clear. She stood on the porch one final time, breathing in the air, letting the moment settle into memory. She hugged the rancher briefly, a simple gesture filled with gratitude. As she walked down the road, she did not look back right away. When she finally did, the ranch stood quiet and strong behind her, just as it always had. She walked forward, not with fear, but with steady steps. Her story did not end on a lonely night. It continued, shaped by resilience, kindness, and the courage to choose life again. She had closed her eyes once, ready to disappear, but she opened them to a future she never thought possible, and this time she walked toward it fully awake.